On today's Locked On NBA Game Night podcast, Luka Doncic signs with the LA Lakers, his extension, and what are the biggest flaws for NBA contenders?
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
Let's get it going on the Locked On NBA Game Night podcast. We're talking about Luka Doncic inking his contract extension with the Los Angeles Lakers. Is the CBA truly that scary after the New York Knicks have locked up their core and what the Thunder did this summer? And we're going to give you the biggest weaknesses for every contender in the NBA with Gavin, Schall, host of Locked On Knicks. I'm Rylan, Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder. Gavin, we got some news today in the NBA. It's always great when you're doing NBA Game Night on the offseason and your day is the day chosen for a breaking news story. And it was chosen for Luka Doncic, who inks his extension with the Los Angeles Lakers. What are your initial thoughts on this news? Was it expected for you, or did you kind of buy into the notion that he might wait it out and just see what happens with LA?
Yeah, I got a tip yesterday from a source that won't be named saying this was going to happen, so I got to give him credit. So it was not surprising to me in terms of the last 24 hours, but I think it makes sense for both sides for Luka. I mean the prohibitive or the alleged concern the Dallas Mavericks had about his long-term health, like he locks in substantial long-term money, 3-year, $165 million deal, while also maintaining flexibility, right? He gives the Lakers a real chance to show him something. Obviously, this is going to be something of a transition year for LA. They've telegraphed that they expect LeBron to either retire or move on to a different team after this season. They'll play out this year, and after that, it's going to be about Luka, and they have an offseason and a full regular season to build around him and show him, hey, we can give you something. Honestly, kind of similar to what you had in Dallas, which, Rylan, we talked about in the aftermath of that trade. I thought the Mavericks had built essentially a perfect roster around Luka Doncic, right? Give him a quality second scorer, our championship quality second scorer in Kyrie Irving, insulate him with defense, insulate him with size and lob catching centers. And it's on the Lakers now to kind of recreate that in LA in an environment clearly where they believe in him a lot more. And from Luka's perspective, he gets to see if they can do that. If they can't, he has that opt out in 2028. But if he just wants the most possible money and he trusts that the Lakers are going to build around him, he can sign up to a 5-year, $417 million contract heading into that 2027-2028 season. So I see it as kind of a win-win for both sides. Obviously, the only downside for either party is the Lakers in a perfect world would have gotten that full 4-year, $229 million deal done and not really had to worry about Luka leaving within a couple seasons.
Yeah, I think that this is a great deal for Luka, and it did balance exactly what he wanted, was kind of the wait and see approach, like you mentioned, but also getting the money and getting the security. I do believe that this wasn't too much of a surprise after you get past what LeBron James did whenever he opted into the contract, and how the Lakers have basically admitted that this is Luka's team, this is Luka's franchise, how DeAndre Ayton only shouted out Luka Doncic whenever they were talking to him after he signed with the Lakers. Like, this is Luka's team now. He's gone on this revenge tour this summer of getting in great shape and looking incredible and being on Men's Health. And he's one of the best players in the world. Look, I think that Luka is one of the easiest players to build around because he is so talented himself and he makes the players around him just play at a higher level. He's like a quarterback that can just throw you open and just work with whatever receivers that you give him. You look at what he did in that finals run with Dallas. It's like, PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. Had no business being who they were in that playoff run. Being guys who could knock down threes at a high clip. But the quality of threes that Luka creates for his teammates because of him being a matchup nightmare, along with his elite level passing, it's going to open the floor for if you just give him a decent shooter, he's going to give them such great opportunities that it elevates their game because now they're taking even better looks. So I think that the team building part of this for LA is so much easier around Luka, even though they're going to have to navigate some financial stuff. They're going to have to try to do this at least on the front end with not a ton of assets, but eventually it's going to get very easy around Luka Doncic. And this is going to be a situation where I think at the end of the contract, the Lakers will have done enough to keep Luka around for probably the length of his career or close to it, because you're going to get the mix of Luka himself is going to be a one-man show, just making you competitive. I think that they've made great moves this offseason, frankly, Gavin. I think that for the hand that they were dealt, they've played that hand the best you possibly can. They're taking shots on desperate guys who want to prove themselves and who complement Luka's skill set perfectly on paper. Like DeAndre Ayton, I know he's a lot of flaws. On paper, he should be maximized by Luka Doncic, and he should be desperate to prove himself in the NBA this season. So I think that they've done everything right this offseason. If they continue that trend, they're going to be a good team. Luka's going to want to be the face of the Lakers, and they're going to move forward now with yet another elite franchise icon, which the Lakers seem to always have, stands for a couple of seasons in their franchise's history. So I think that this is a great move for LA. It's a great move for Luka. He clearly trusts them. Like after this signing, I think that it's clear he trusts them, and everything that you read about Luka, that's a big deal. Like he really is a emotional player on the court, but he's also emotional, it appears, off the court, of just wanting that security and communication between the front office and ownership and himself. And that's why it hurt him so bad with the Dallas thing, on top of it being a silly trade, and on top of that being where he started his career. And I think that he does have a level of trust already built up with the Lakers. Now, it does look like LeBron James is also right, of course, that they're building this around Luka. Do you think that this changes anything for LeBron's threats, or is it still just, hey, play out the season and then we'll figure it out later?
No, I think LeBron is ultimately going to play out the season. I don't think at this point in his career, there's something Zach Lowe's talked about on his podcast, like he has it in him to just throw a hissy fit to the point that they have to deal him. And I don't even like we talked about on this show, like there isn't really an obvious better situation for LeBron. It seems like other teams have moved on at this point. I'd be shocked if it ended up anywhere else. I do think I'll go back to what I said in my initial comment, that I do think this is a transition year for the Lakers. And the single biggest thing for them this year is getting Luka Doncic back to being Luka Doncic, right? Because he took a pretty clear step back last season. It was understandable, right? Given the trade, given the injury, that he wasn't going to quite be the same guy. And I think this offseason, like, and honestly, the fact that they got eliminated in the first round and he didn't have to put his body through another long playoff run is significant for him. Like, you got to remember, this is a guy that's been playing like highest level of professional basketball or within the top two levels of professional basketball since he was 16 years old, right? That is a decade long playoff runs, championships with Real Madrid, Western Conference Finals runs and championship runs with the Dallas Mavericks. At his best, this guy is I would say still clearly a top 4 player on the planet. I think he has a ceiling as high as anyone other than maybe Nikola Jokic. Despite the fact that he wasn't quite himself last year, the Lakers had a plus 17 net rating when he was on the floor. That is 99th percentile in the NBA. They were as good as any team in the NBA when Luka Doncic was on the court for them, at least in the regular season. There were, I think, some worrying statistical signs from him. Like his efficiency kind of fell off a cliff, at least once he got to LA. Like you look at that points per shot attempt stat that Cleaning the Glass has. That's my favorite kind of catch-all for shooting efficiency. He was 91st percentile in 22-23. He was 95th percentile in 23-24, 71st percentile on the Mavs last year, 73rd percentile on the Lakers. So I'm like, all right, let's take a deep dive and see where it fell off. His rim frequency was down pretty substantially from early in his career. Again, I don't know if that's just a product of him dealing with the injury and then dealing with the aftermath of the injury. But when you talk about what kind of shape is a guy in, I look, what's their rim rate and how often are they getting to the free throw line? That went down pretty decently. His accuracy at the rim, at least on the Lakers, went down pretty substantially. 76% in 23-24, 77% first half of the year in the Mavs. On the Lakers, just 67%. Maybe some of that was not having an ideal lob threat, though Jackson Hayes did a decent job in terms of that respect. His accuracy and volume both down from floater range. That is an area of the floor when he's able to get to like 5 to 8 feet and just put you on his hip and throw it up fake and get to a step through or get to a short fadeaway. Like, he is typically just dominant in that area. Again, the volume and efficiency were both down. He typically hovers in the mid 50s in that area, which is absolutely elite. Last season, he was about 10% worse than that. He was merely good there, more reliant on long twos than he's ever been in his career, more reliant on threes than he's ever been in his career, though he shot well from there, and that's kind of the one bellwether that's kept his efficiency up a little bit. Defensively, actually some good trends for him. His defensive playmaking has trended up, and he's been an elite defensive rebounder his entire career, so that makes up for some of the weaknesses on ball. I say all this to say, like, B-Ball Index has a great catch-all stat for some of this stuff. He has F-level shot quality. That is the worst possible shot quality. Obviously, some of that is inherent to being one of the more ball-centric guys in the NBA, right? You're taking the most shots. You're not super wiggly. Like, you're going to be taking some of the harder shots. He can take and make incredibly hard shots. My big question for the Lakers is, like, what can you do to make this guy's life easier? And a combination of him potentially being in the best shape of his life and maybe post LeBron, having someone who can just handle the ball and take some of that weight off him, like Kyrie Irving, but maybe someone even better, someone else in the prime of their career. I don't think that's going to be Austin Reeves. I'm curious if they can find that guy, because to me, that will be the single most significant factor in terms of how successful his Laker career is. Obviously, build out a roster similar to the Mavs, but make it so, like, at the end of games, at the end of series, he's still at full strength when at times, like particularly in the NBA Finals with the Mavs, like he wasn't quite that.
Yeah, I think that when you look at it, like, last year is not indicative of who's going to be this season and in future years in terms of his Lakers stat. You mentioned the injury that he battled throughout the entire season, going back to the Dallas era of that season. And then also the awkwardness at first of, like, trying to integrate himself into a new team and playing next to a guy like LeBron James. And so it's like, we had to integrate himself into Dallas. It was just, he was the guy from the word go, and it just didn't really matter. But playing next to LeBron, I think, was a little bit of an adjustment period for him and for the Lakers as a whole. And so I think that a whole training camp, a whole off season where he's clearly in great shape, and you pointed out the numbers that can improve because of the shape that he's in now. And I just see him returning and being that top 4 player at worst for the Lakers and for the NBA. And it gives the NBA a star in LA. And I think that does matter. And I think that, you know, you can hate the Lakers because they're the evil empire, but it does matter to have somebody the quality of Luka, who for any given season, even with Nikola Jokic, to me, could be the best player in the league for any given season. Like, having that in the purple and gold is a big deal. Yeah,
I completely agree. And I want to see what is their ability to bring in that second star that I talked about. Because again, it's not going to be LeBron at age 41. Maybe it will be next year, but it's not going to be him long term. I think Austin Reeves is fantastic. He's not that guy on a championship level team. Free agency in the NBA, like we'll talk about a little bit next segment with the new CBA, like, hasn't really been a thing. And that is typically an area the Lakers have thrived. Like, is there another Anthony Davis out there that's going to say, you know what, I want to be a Laker. I want to play with Luka. A lot of people have talked about it being like Giannis with him coming to Dallas for years. Like, maybe that's him in 2 seasons. Like, we don't know who that guy is going to be. Everything about NBA history tells you that there will be someone, right? Because the Lakers, over and over and over again, this is just who they are. They pull a rabbit out of the hat, and to their credit, something to watch with new ownership, like, they treat superstars seemingly better than any franchise does in the NBA, and they make it a thing. And, like, they do everything possible to ensure that those guys are comfortable, which, to your point, Luka obviously is going to really value after he feels like he was betrayed by Dallas.
And just as one last note to leave this on, from Keith Smith, a cap expert, a front office expert, even has a show called The Front Office Show. It's really good. Keith Smith says that next season, the 2026 free agency period, the Lakers can get a range, if they want to, between staying over the cap or creating up to $84 million in cap space. Yeah. Like, that's what they can do with their flexibility because of their non-guarantees and options, etc. They could get $84 million in salary cap, which is going to be a big deal. Now, free agency isn't what it once was, but when you're talking about filling out this roster, especially with ancillary players, like, that's a big deal for the Lakers, for a team that, like, your natural inkling as a player, especially as a high quality role player, is if the Lakers have cap space and you're going to play next to Luka Doncic and play for the Lakers, you're going to want to do it. So I'm very curious, as you mentioned, the transitional year, how they come out the other side of this season, on top of still being in our list coming up of the contenders in the NBA. What are their biggest weaknesses that could stop them from winning a championship? Is the CBA truly that restrictive, and more? But first, I want to say right now, but our friends over at Game Time, go check out Game Time today, because we've all been there. Whenever you're logging on early and waiting around forever for a concert ticket to go on sale, and you lose your spot on the show that you're dying to see in the queue, live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop the closer it gets to showtime. You can save up to 60% off on these killer last-minute deals. If you're tired of the endless scrolling trying to find the best deal, Game Time's Zone Deals picks the best seats in your section for you. And you even get a panoramic view from your seat. That way there's no surprises once you get to the venue. Game Time is great. I love the fact that there's no hidden fees. The price you see, the price you get. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Go download the Game Time app, create your account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create your account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Go download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. We're back on the Locked On Game Night podcast here talking about the NBA Contenders, the CBA, and so much more. I'm Rylan, Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder. That's Gavin, Schall, host of Locked On Knicks. Gavin, your Knicks also made a move this week, and they re-signed Mikal Bridges, and they kind of have their core intact. The Thunder, of course, throughout this summer have been shelling out extensions to everybody. Jay Will, AJ Mitchell, the top three of Chet and J-Dub and Shea. Is the second apron, is the CBA really that restrictive, really that concerning, or is it just a mechanism for teams who don't believe in their core and don't want to pay their roster to just hide behind and say, well, you know what? Well, we got to make a tough call here, fans, because we did not want to go into the second apron for this caliber of teams, kind of similar to what Memphis did, where they trade Desmond Bane because obviously that big three is not good enough to compete for a championship. So why would you extend all three of them to go into that second apron or close to it whenever they're just not good enough?
Yeah, I think it's a very real concern. I think you look at what happened in Boston is like the good counterfactual to both the Knicks and the Thunder. And that was a team where Brad Stevens, it's hard to argue that he didn't do everything right. Like in the last decade of NBA basketball, probably with the exception of the Kevin Durant Warriors, because that was flukish in its own way. Like that was the most perfect starting five I've seen, right? Totally complimentary. Obviously Drew Holiday getting up there in age, but other than him, like young enough, like fit together, playing perfect modern basketball, top three defensive team in the NBA, top three offensive team in the NBA, and they win a championship, and they run into some poor shooting and a mystery illness for Kristaps Porzingis, and they get upset by the Knicks in the second round, and all of a sudden, all right, that's the end of the run. 2 years, guys, 2 amazing regular seasons, won 60 games twice. We won a title with better injury luck. Maybe they win 2 titles. Maybe they beat the Thunder last year. Who knows? They were my favorite going into the playoffs, and they have to break up the team. Like that does not feel normal. That feels punitive in a way. Like we've talked about, teams should like have some kind of advantage in keeping players they drafted. Like you have to give Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown 2 of the most exorbitant contracts in the NBA. And that doesn't allow you to ultimately bet on Kristaps Porzingis bouncing back. Doesn't allow you to bet on saying, hey, like Drew Holiday, Al Horford. I mean, Horford, they could have re-signed, but like if he had wanted to be there, but like these guys who were going to go down as maybe not career Celtics for Drew just because of what he did in Milwaukee. I'm getting sidetracked. Point is, like, you should be able to keep that team together for 5 years, and they couldn't. I think both the Knicks and Thunder were reliant on, like, one, excellent front offices, even more so for Oklahoma City than the Knicks, and 2, like, slightly fluky scenarios. Like, for the Knicks, it was Jalen Brunson taking about a half value contract, which typically does not happen and is not something I think he would do in a world there was no second apron, and he was sort of forced to pick, all right, get your value or have a legitimate championship contender. To his credit, he chose legitimate championship contention. Oklahoma City, like, just I want to say unique, but they did it once before, but a borderline unique in NBA history case of just drafting extraordinarily well, J-Dub and Chet being ready to play championship level basketball before anyone could expect it, and then just having this like unique just treasure chest of picks going forward to continue to build around this roster that pretty much no other team in the NBA has.
Yeah, and we're never going to know this, but you wonder if the Celtics, if they don't have the Tatum injury, how different this offseason looks for them. They're clearly going to still make moves. They're clearly going to still kind of shed some salary, but to the extent that they did this offseason, I don't think they would have been forced into doing so to where they still would have a championship level team even after this offseason, had Tatum not been out for this entire season. Once he's out for the entire season, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to pay a ton of money for that core and for that that roster that can't really compete. They kind of go into a different boat there. Whereas New York has just signed up to be an even more expensive team than Oklahoma City without the assets that the Thunder have in terms of all their draft picks and in terms of still having more cost-controlled talent on their roster with young guys, and even with some of the extensions that they gave out, like AJ Mitchell is a rotational player for OKC. He's making $3 million a year. Like that is the moves I think that are very important. I think that the CBA is different, and it puts a lot of pressure on your front office to nail draft picks now more than ever. Because you look at Denver, like Denver, if they would have just hit those picks, that Calvin Booth swung and missed on, they would have been in a completely different financial situation in terms of depth, in terms of quality of team, just by nailing their draft picks while having 3 massive contracts on the books, even in this new CBA. Yeah. And they end up coming out on the other side of that, financial situation, a better team and a more competitive team this offseason, even in this era of basketball, than they were heading into it. So I think that there's a level of, if you get the top 3 right and you trust your front office to make savvy trades and savvy draft picks that can really help contribute, you're going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay in the NBA. And then you look at like the Knicks and the Thunder. Yes, the Knicks are a little bit more expensive, but if you just get to the end of these contracts, or even to the final year of them, and then maybe people start demanding a trade, or maybe it becomes untenable to keep everybody under payroll. If you just get to the final year of that contract, that's what a 5-6 year window for the Thunder, for the Knicks, and that core. That's kind of what we've always seen. It was like a almost decade-long window for these teams. Like past that, you're really looking at very unique situations on the other end, where players start taking pay cuts to stay together. Similarly, in a small way to like what the Warriors did up until they lost Klay Thompson. Like if you just get the next 5 years for both New York and OKC, then you've gotten what you always would have in the NBA before the second apron was introduced, and it does make the front office need to make their draft picks right and need to figure out cost-controlled players, but that was always very valuable. It just becomes more valuable now. I don't think that it necessarily is going to break up. The point is, I don't think it'll necessarily break up the top players on your roster, the top 3, and for the Knicks, they've got the top 4 on their roster.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're really reliant on like player, like even Mikal Bridges took $6 million less than he could have. Like some of the Knicks got Deuce McBride, who's such a key piece for them, on this incredible contract 2 years ago, where he's making like $4 million a year for the next 2 seasons. Like you need some home runs, and you need your stars to work with you, and you really can't make mistakes. Like you mentioned the Nuggets. I look at that deal they did for Dario Saric, right? Like and like he was a totally useless player for them. Like did not play for them in the playoffs, and like they're just paying him $5 million to rot on their bench. They have the De'Ron Holmes injury where he tears his Achilles, and you make one mistake, you have one injury, and all of a sudden, like it can cost someone like Nikola Jokic in his prime. And obviously, look, there are more factors there. Oklahoma City was great. Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr. both get hurt. Like I don't want to say that was the only reason Denver lost, but you lose your margin for error. I think
it was a big reason. Yeah. I mean, Denver had a lot go wrong for them. In terms of just roster construction. Mm-hmm. And they went to 7 games with the Thunder, and had they had a healthy Aaron Gordon, who killed the Thunder the entire series, it's obviously a more competitive game, and it's not a blowout. And then once it's a more competitive game, it's a 1-game sample size, and you have the best player in the world. So it's like you can still navigate these waters. I just don't think that the second apron and the new CBA is a death sentence for sustainability as it's being billed as. Coming up, let's talk contenders. What's the biggest flaw for every NBA contender that's going to hinder them from winning a championship? We're back on Locked On NBA Game Night. I'm Rylan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder. That's Gavin Schall, host of Locked On Knicks. Gavin, instead of buy or sell, we're going to play your game of naming the biggest flaws for every NBA contender. We have on the board the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Knicks, the Cavs, the Lakers, the Rockets, the Timberwolves. Let's start at the very top. Gavin, what's your big flaw for the OKC Thunder?
Oh, you're putting me in a tough position here, Ryan. There's not really an obvious answer here. How about this? I'm gonna write down the 4 that I wrote, and I'm gonna let you pick, because I want off this hot seat. My 4 were potentially a much stronger Denver Nuggets team that Isaiah Hartenstein went on Paul George's podcast this offseason and said they were little insulting to the Pacers, but he said they were the one team they felt like they could come out and play their best and still lose against. I think unless Denver just gets unlucky with injury, like there's not a world where you don't see a much stronger version of the Nuggets next time around, healthier, deeper, and I think Nikola Jokic will be a lot better and more efficient in that ecosystem. My second concern was Chet Holmgren's health, which it's a weird one, right? Because he played every single game his second season. He's played less than half the total regular season games in his career, though, but he's also never missed a playoff game. So like where the injury is just fluky, is he actually injury prone? My third concern is the one you've talked about a lot with me, their 3-point shooting, just 34% from three in the playoffs. Obviously doesn't stop them from winning a title, but would have had a lot more margin for error if they shot the way they did in the regular season. And my only other one was self-satisfaction, like really, really hard to find that motivation 2 years in a row. But are any of those real, or am I just making stuff up for interesting conversation here?
So I think that they're all real. I think that the least real of them all would be the satisfaction, only because this is a team that like publicly talks about wanting to be great, wanting to be like the best of all time, etc. And there's also an element of, even though Chet and J-Dub have gotten paid and they won a championship, this was the fun max. This was not the serious max where it becomes an exorbitant amount of money, to where they still want to continue to climb personally. And that personal climb up the NBA ladder will result in team success as well. You have guys like Case and Wallace who want to continue to prove financially, individually. So even if you just look at it from selfish reasons, much less for team reasons, I think that they'll still be hungry. The Nuggets are terrifying to Oklahoma City, and they're terrifying to the rest of the West. I think that that's a legitimate concern. And then the Chet Holmgren health thing, it is strange for Chet Holmgren, because whenever he does not suffer a fluke injury, the likes of which we've never seen a player in a pro-am game slip on a wet court, getting barreled in by LeBron James and have a Liz Frank fracture, which has hardly ever happened to NBA players. And we've never seen an NBA player, period, break their hip. So it's like, if you don't have those two things happen, he plays 82 games in a season, and like you said, has not missed a playoff game. So we just don't know about Chet. And I kept injuries for the most part off of this list, just because we're doing this under the pretense that like they're fully healthy and that they're the best versions of themselves. But I do think that shooting is a grave concern. If you look at the Thunder, they should not have won a championship this year if you just look at how they shot the basketball. It's unbelievable that a team shot that bad from three in the modern era and won a title. And that's because of their suffocating, overwhelming defense while there were dicey moments in there. It was dicey against the Pacers. You're almost down 3-1. It was very dicey against the Nuggets. Again, if Gordon doesn't get hurt and Michael Porter Jr. can lift his arm, then you might lose to Denver. And it all stems from their 3-point shooting, because on nights where they did shoot the ball well, it was an avalanche blowout game. On nights where they didn't shoot the ball well, that gap significantly shrunk, and they didn't do anything yet. And there's still a trade deadline transactional window, perhaps, but they haven't done anything, and it doesn't appear that they're going to do anything externally to improve their 3-point shooting. So if you just run this back and the guys that you're expecting to take a step from three don't take that step, and you're once again literally 13 out of 16 teams in the playoffs, and you're the 13th team shooting threes in terms of percentages, you're not gonna repeat. You're not gonna be able to do this again, I do not think. So shooting is what I had, and shooting is the biggest deal of them all.
Yeah, that's totally fair. All right, you wanna bounce to the Denver Nuggets?
Let's do it.
All right. My biggest concern for the Denver Nuggets is I was torn between this and just peak Jamal Murray still being there, but they almost showed in that Oklahoma City series that they could win a championship with like 90% of who Jamal Murray was in that titles season. So I couldn't put it there. My biggest concern for the Denver Nuggets is there a clear-cut fifth guy? The depth is so much better, but I'm still not sure who they want on the floor in that fifth spot. Obviously, it'll be Jamal Murray, it'll be Cam Johnson, it'll be Aaron Gordon, it'll be Nikola Jokic. Christian Brown is the obvious answer. He has not shot the ball well in the postseason, though 30% last season was actually a substantial step up than how he shot it in previous years. Is it Bruce Brown, who has like that championship equity with them? Is it Tim Hardaway just to maximize the amount of shooting and the offense you have on the floor? Like, does Julian Strawther emerge as that guy like he showed in Game 6 against the Thunder? Like, who is that person for you? Because to me, like, it might have been Russell Westbrook if they wanted to bring him back. They decided not to, and now I'm not sure that guy is.
Yeah, I like that. I like that concern for the Nuggets. To me, the fifth guy can almost be anybody because of how good the four guys are that you have on the team. Like, the four guys match up with any team. I mean, you look at the Thunder, they're clearly the best team in the NBA. They're clearly the deepest team in the NBA. But the Nuggets five, just put anyone in there, Christian in there, whoever, their five match up with the Thunder's best five very, very, very well. So mine was even more just, you can dismiss mine way easier than I can dismiss yours, because mine was just still playoff front court depth. I just look at Jonas Valanciunas and like, he's never been a good playoff player. He gets played off the floor routinely, and in the small amount of time that Nikola Jokic is going to be off the floor in the postseason, who are you going to turn to? Because I do not want it to be Valanciunas personally. I love De'Ron Holmes. He's a rookie coming off of an injury. You know, he's a redshirt rookie coming off of an injury. Is he going to be ready come playoff time? But the counter argument and why I still have Denver at 1B or 2A, if you will, is going to be the fact that weakness doesn't really matter. Like, Jokic is going to play all but 5 minutes in a game in the playoffs, and maybe even 3 minutes in the game in the playoffs, to where you can't possibly be any worse than they were a year ago. Like, whatever you get from Valanciunas, who I do not like in the playoffs, whatever you get from De'Ron Holmes, who's a rookie, is tenfold better than what you got a year ago whenever Jokic sat and they took the Thunder to 7 games in a very competitive series. So I just don't think that it really matters, but that is one thing that the more you put them in the playoffs and the more you put them with Jokic on-off numbers, that could hurt them a little bit.
Yeah. All right. I'll jump to my Knicks real quick. I wrote down 3. Again, I'm not following the assignment, but I'll just rapid fire through them. They need Mikal Bridges to be who they thought he was going to be, and defensively he was in some ways, but as a point of attack defender, I don't know if he still has that in him, and that is a major issue, because if not, they don't necessarily have that guy, at least against guards in the playoffs. Against wings, they obviously, OG Anunoby is a great option. I don't know if it's possible to win a title with 2 of the weaker defenders in the NBA, in Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. I do think Cat, with the right scheme, you can shield some of that. Similar with Brunson, it is hard to cover for both of them, and at times they were better with just one of those guys on the floor. So that's an open question, and I think the extension of that is Mike Brown has to lean into their best lineups. Tom Thibodeau consistently refused to play their most effective lineup, so that is sort of my biggest concern there. Let's go Houston Rockets. Rylan, what do you think is the biggest concern for Houston?
The Houston Rockets is a interesting one. I think that with them, one is just, experience, but we're seeing now that players are ready faster than they've ever been, in the sense of, outside of Kevin Durant, like, you're relying on a lot of guys like Amen Thompson. You're relying on a lot of guys who have only been in one playoff series yet. And look, for the Thunder, that was enough. So even experience to me isn't a good catch-all term for Houston. Mine would just be their defensive level, in the sense of, I look at Houston and their path to a championship looks very similar to last year's Thunder team, where it's all done on the defensive side of the floor, and you have one guy who really is just critical for you offensively in Kevin Durant. Can they get to that level defensively, where to alleviate some of the half-court offensive struggles, and the Thunder struggled mightily in the half-court last postseason, to alleviate some of that, can you rack up stops, push the pace in transition, and just overwhelm teams on the defensive side, when now you had a really good defense last year, but you got to not only duplicate that success from a year ago with moving parts of, you got Kevin Durant and Şengün on the floor. You have a front court who, look, we'll see how they manage Adams, and we'll see how they manage Clint Capella and all these guys that they've brought in. I just think that their defense isn't a flaw. It's just the kind of gap between where they were and where they need to be. It's the hardest leap to make, from a really good defense to a great one. And I think that they need a great defense to really get this thing done.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think shot creation would be how I would sum it up. Like, I don't think there's quite enough there, and I don't think Kevin Durant at this point in his career, like, I don't know if he can have like a 34% usage rate on a championship team for 4 rounds. Like, I don't really see that. It has to be by committee. And for that to work, they need both Şengün and Thompson to make significant steps forward. My last one, Cleveland Cavaliers. Does going double big put too significant of a cap on their offense? Maybe that's dumb, because they had, I think, the best offense in NBA history in the regular season. Their total numbers for the playoffs were amazing, but it just didn't feel like it always worked against the Pacers. Maybe some of that was health. I just think unless Evan Mobley becomes a high volume, high accuracy 3-point shooter in the playoffs, and he certainly took a step forward in that capacity, I don't know if the double big works against some of the best teams in the NBA, but there might not be a team in the Eastern Conference that can challenge them enough for that to matter. So that might be a concern just for the NBA Finals. Rylan, if you want to finish on them, let's bring it full circle. What's your biggest concern for the Lakers?
Yeah, the Lakers, I think, are a point of attack defender away from being a legitimate contender. You look at their defense, and JJ Redick did a great job of maximizing their defensive talent level and playing this team style that could really hide some of their flaws and maximize their strengths. But in the playoffs, when the game slows down and you're playing isolation scores, who's the stopper for them? I don't think that Marcus Smart can be that guy at this point of his career. While I don't think he's completely washed the way other people do, I just don't think he's a complete stopper. And can you find someone to step up in that role from now until the start of April? We're going to have to wait and see. And then for the Timberwolves, I just think that I do not trust their role players to hit threes. And that's the biggest part for me, is because you see Anthony Edwards make a leap in terms of playmaking last postseason, and it got ruined in a way because his guys could not hit the shots against OKC. I think the Thunder series was bad statistically for Anthony Edwards, but if you actually watched it, the processing, the playmaking was perfect. His teammates let him down. So can they find someone to step up now after losing Nickeil Alexander-Walker? Gavin, this was a very fun show, very good show for this Saturday in August. Until next time, be good and be good to one another.